Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
Yeah, so like Latterwave or Latterwave, something like that. Steven Smilanich is with us. He's a good man. I'm glad to have you. Good to see you. You're in Japan, right?
Right. Yes, I am.
So it's
I
been
am
a
in
minute.
Japan. Dude, like freaking check this out.
Hold on, let me zoom. What is this? So this is do they clean your house or
no, it's a maid cafe. You go to it and like the waitresses wear cute maid outfits and they serve you cutesy food and they call you master. It's some fun stuff. And then
okay.
I also got this little Sasuke figurine where he's got this Susanoo going on. And so yeah, I've been living life as well as I can over here.
So you already started out with a kind of an interest in Japan, I guess, before you came there. You weren't just kind of like, oh, weird, I'm in Japan. Like you've seen anime, you've thought about.
No, there was definitely that weird feeling like, oh, I'm in Japan, and holy crap, I moved to Japan, and what in the world is a pasty white boy like me doing in Japan?
Well, you gotta be some eye candy. I mean, they're always. Do they like you, or do you feel like? Because I've heard that Japan can be like hard if you're not Japanese. Are they nice to you?
Like especially if you're out in the country. So I started out in Hamamatsu as an assistant language teacher teaching English, but then I left that job and came out here to Tokyo, where it's much more normal to be white. So like, yeah, if you're out in like in the country where I was, it's super heavily Japanese. Like there's no other race around, and you just feel super weird going shopping, and you just it's crazy, especially for a guy like me. And
do they look at you like you're an anomaly? Sorry, do they look at you like you're an anomaly, or do they look at you
I don't know if like I definitely feel like an anomaly. I don't know if they look at me like one. It's like I'm this white boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I just stand out like a sore thumb, and I can barely speak the language. I don't even know what all these crazy characters mean, and I'm just
so that's
here.
the difference. I wonder if it's like, because an anomaly, like if you were like an anomaly and you showed up and you spoke perfect Japanese and you never made a cultural faux pas, I feel like that would be just as shocking. But for the most part,
dude, I am a walking cultural faux pas.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be really hard for you and them, right? Like, because they don't know that you don't know, and you don't know what the rules are. Do you have examples of that? Like some things that happen?
I guess one thing in particular is when I went to a graduation ceremony. So they're very prim and proper over there. Japanese can't say Steven. Yeah, they say that my name in Japanese is Suteban. They don't have a st, so you have to go straight. You have to put a U in between. Suteban. It's very interesting hearing Japanese people try to pronounce English words. Like they don't have L's. If you've seen Christmas Story, you know Asian people famously don't have L's. So they say R. Like right. I had a kid in one of my classes. I was trying to teach I like, and instead of saying I like, he said I like you, because they don't have L's. I like movies. I like manga. I like anime. So it's very fun.
So they just assume it has to be an R sound, even if you competently got the L. Like,
yeah, they just
he's still gonna.
If you look at the writing system, they have like two different writing systems, or three different writing systems. They have kanji, katakana, and hiragana. Kanji is like the really big stuff, the big thick characters that are from China. They get those from China. Like they got those in like 500 AD, because before that they didn't have a writing system, but they already had a spoken language. So they had to come up with hiragana and katakana to be like, here's how you pronounce this kanji, and so on. And then they would use it for specific Japanese words. And then they came up with katakana when they came across foreign words, to try to pronounce foreign words as best they can. And so everything is, you can't have a letter unless it's a vowel or the letter N. You can't have any letter on its own. So it has to be su instead of just S. It has to be te instead of just T. It has to be fu. The famous one is fu, F-U, instead of just F. So
there's kind of an assume. It's weird because we don't assume these vowels, but they totally have to because of the structure.
The way that their language is structured, they always assume that. But anyway, I was getting into so they're very proper over here in Japan. Everything is very proper and very uptight a lot of the times, and they can get offended by tiny little things. So you really got to be careful. So I was at a graduation ceremony, and I was told very specifically that I couldn't cross my legs. I couldn't sit cross-legged, because
like you weren't doing it right, or like you can't. You're not allowed to.
No, you're not allowed to. You have to sit. you gotta sit straight up, your legs just separated, feet planted on the floor. You just gotta be super upright.
I'm trying it.
And like if you crossed your legs, it's sort of, I had to look it up later, but I guess crossing your legs makes you look like you think you're a super hot shot guy who's like better than everybody else. And they don't like that. They gotta hammer down any nail that sticks up over here in Japan. So you can't do that. You gotta sit upright with your legs.
So basically, man spreading.
No, you can't.
Man spreading is illegal,
especially on the train. You can't man spread at all. Like they'll literally look. They'll give you the evil eye if you man spread on the train or the bus.
Okay, so that's another question. So like you're in Japan,
and it's like, dude, you're not leaving room for other people to sit down if they want to sit down.
Right. I've seen some crazy stuff where people force themselves in and out of the trains. Yeah. But you just said they give you the evil eye. So like no one's yelling at you, no one's hitting you.
No, they don't. They like to be very non-confrontational in Japan. So they'll figure out a way to go around the situation and they'll tell somebody else to tell you about it, which is what happened to me a lot. And so they'll never upright go to you about it. And they just like to avoid conflict as much as possible. I think America dropping bombs on them made them very anti-conflict and anti-war. Because okay, we don't want to deal with that anymore. Let's just I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, probably.
So yeah, while I'm in the graduation ceremony, I'm sitting there and I'm just the whole time I'm trying to resist not crossing my legs. And one time I did it by accident, and somebody next to me tapped my shoulder and was like, "No, this, no." Okay, so I had to uncross my legs, and the graduation ceremonies are super robotic. I think you could say they march in line and then they go up on stage, instead of like in American graduation ceremonies, you run up, you grab your diploma, you're like, yeah. But here you got to go up, you got to be, straight faced, go up, thank you, bow, turn to the audience, bow, walk off. No yelling, no throwing of the hats. You just get up, take it, bow, walk off.
Right, because if you like even were to acknowledge that you have to be like the machine that they've made you into, proving that you actually achieved that goal of becoming this thing. Is that kind of how it feels?
Yeah, they don't like anything that sticks up.
Right.
So it's very hard to be individualistic, but it's still a fun country to live in and experience the culture like that. They definitely could afford to loosen up a little bit. Oh, prices are rising in Japan.
Yeah, I've heard some. I was going to ask you about that because, like, the thing is also before we get into like Jesus, Mormonism, and Jesus in Japan and all the cool things. I'm just kind of curious about Japan, right?
Because Jesus in Japan is a very fun story. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, actually, we definitely. Have you gotten to see? We'll have to go talk. I need
to be planning a trip up there so I can actually like film it and talk about it, and it's such a cool thing.
Well,
it's this little town that's like up north in the northern part of the main island. It's fun.
So
I heard prices were rising, but at the same time, the value of the yen is going down. So it's a very odd scenario that's going on.
Right. And so this is weird because the same prices have been the same way for at least 30 or so years in Japan. Like everyone knows the price of an egg or a pencil, a coffee. It's always been the same. What's happening? Do you see this like affecting Japan? Like that they can't buy things and like people are getting paid lower than any other wages, right? Isn't it like the wages haven't risen, in 30 years.
Right. Well, I've never been very good at keeping track of money in general. I've just kind of done my own thing and bought what I think needs to be bought. But and so I'm not good when it comes to financial stuff. You got to talk to my grandpa about financial stuff, but I have heard that it's rising. I don't know. I couldn't tell you any like personal experience with. Wait, what? This was 300 yen yesterday, and now it's 400 yen. You know, I
It's not
couldn't
freaking
give
you out
you
like that.
yeah, I couldn't give you any super detailed examples of that at this moment because I don't really
Yeah.
pay attention to prices all too well. I probably should, but I don't.
But do you think like, does it feel, I don't know, like, do you, because I remember I was in Chile right as everything was changing with The Bachelorette, and I wonder, like, do you have that kind of perfect storm feeling in Japan that things are not staying the same way much longer? Or do you think what's going to happen?
Well, I would say there are a lot of things that worry me about Japan. The money issue hasn't really been too much of a thing for me, I don't think, but like it probably is for other people. I'm a spoiled
if you live
kid
in Japan your whole life and you don't
I just got here to Japan last December, and I'm also a spoiled kid who lives off of his daddy's money. So I couldn't tell you too much, you know. I just do the odd jobs here and there ever since leaving the ALC job. And so
what was the ALC job?
As far as I know, the prices here are better than America. Like if you want to buy a
ALS,
house,
you're talking about the
if you
language
want to buy a house in Japan, it's easier, it's cheaper than buying a house in America. Granted, it'll be a lot smaller because everything here is super small and tight, but still, you'll get a house easier out here.
Good brand new house, yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at this picture because we talked about Jesus and the idea of Jesus in Japan. I love it. I love this idea. I love the idea of Jesus in the Americas. I like the idea of Jesus in India.
Right.
I'm a big fan of like world tour Jesus is probably one of the coolest ideas for Jesus, I think.
So I really need to make that plan to go up to that village.
They say that this happened in his missing years. So like the Mormon stuff is all like after he's died and resurrected.
Well, it was a little bit during his right. They say it was before and a little bit after too. So as far as the story goes, so you could technically say that Christianity is older than Buddhism in Japan because Christ came to Japan before the Buddhist monks did. So, but in any case, I guess the thing was like, I guess the myth came about where like they discovered these artifacts in this one little village that are strangely Hebrew in origin, seems strangely Hebrew in origin. And they learn about this shepherd guy who came over like around the same time as Jesus. And they're like, oh, it must be Jesus who came over here and learned from like, I guess, Shinto monks on Mount Fuji. And so the story goes is he came over here to learn about Shintoism and learn about other like Japanese philosophies, and then he went back.
Right.
He also went to India and probably lots of other places and accumulated all this wisdom. And so he came back when he was like 30 and was like, hey guys, I'm totally the son of God and you should follow me because I traveled around and got all this awesome wisdom or something.
Another
like
really
that.
base Slavic dude, a Jewish Slavic dude, nonetheless. Crimean Nicholas Notovich. He wrote an amazing book, The Unknown Years of Jesus, after he left Galilee for India. And he went and he studied the Buddhists and the Hindus. And this is where a lot of these ideas come from. Some people say he's full of it. Other people say he's a spy. I think he's all of it at once is kind of the thing. And he saw a lot of these temples. One of the things I was going to bring up was we talked about this before. Oh, let's do this first. If you go to the Japanese imperial regalia, one of the conspiracies that the Japanese have was that in the 1800s, they read the back of it and saw it had Hebrew writing on the back of the shield. And so that's why it's forbidden to be seen by anyone else, because it says, I am that I am in like ancient, like Hebrew, Asher, Asher, Ayer, right? So that's interesting. The idea that kind of corroborates at the highest level, the idea that the Japanese had some sort of influence by the Arabs and Jews, early on. But the other one was the Ixthus, because you look at the Ixthus, and the original version of the Ixthus was you take all of the letters. We're used to seeing the fish on bumper stickers, but you take all of the letters and you make this wheel, right? get the I, the X, the O, the Y, the E. It's all in this wheel. Okay. So that looks very much like the Dharma chakra. Okay. And so the Dharma chakra in Buddhism and Jainism and ancient Hinduism, it's that eight-spoked wheel. And you can see examples. Where was the other one I was looking at? Like you look at some of the Yasukuni shrines and the usage of that, the spoked wheel, right? So much of Japan is about that spoked wheel. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
About the spoked wheel? I don't, honestly, I don't know much about the spoked wheel. I know it's a very common theme. I didn't realize you could trace it back to Hebrewism though.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And then also that Jesus was using it, right?
It
we
seems,
usually think of him
like,
riding a fish.
Yeah. But when I see the spoked wheel, it definitely looks like it's the cycle of samsara, kind of an idea. Like everything is repeating again and again, and you're going to be reincarnated and stuff like that. So that's what my mind goes to when I look at the wheel. It's the wheel of time kind of an idea.
Do you have any thoughts on do you like marry any of these Eastern ideas with the Western ideas? Because it sounds like that's kind of the goal, right?
I mean, that's why, right. That's why I'm in Japan, is so I can marry my Western blood with some Eastern blood.
Literally and metaphorically, I respect it. Okay.
No, I was being straight literal. I was being straight literal. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting ideas, and it's like when my mom and I went over to my parents came over and we went to a couple of museums, and there's this one museum where there's this statue who's straight up doing, I don't know if I should be showing it, but like there's this statue who's straight up doing like temple covenant signs, and it's like, oh holy crap. And it's like it's this Buddhist statue, but he's literally got his arms raised like he's at the temple veil doing temple stuff.
My personal, and like I don't know, this isn't my bishop speaking or something, but like if something's in the wild, if something's in the wild, I feel like you can show it. I don't know. It's up to you what you feel about that. But if you've seen something in the wild and it was done by a Buddhist, and it could like unite people under a similar belief system, because like it seems like this is this deluge flood thing. Jesus is looking for people that are descendant of Noah that have a slightly different interpretation than this, because at the Abrahamic level of God, you have a lot of people saying God is this angry dude who wants to hurt you all the time. He's a jealous God, angry God, wrathful God, which isn't everyone's interpretation of God, right? So Jesus isn't even saying that, even to the point that the Marcionites are like, well, maybe it's like two gods. Like maybe the other God is dead, and this is like Nietzsche, and the new God is Jesus who loves people. I mean, the early Christians.
Or you look at it from the Gnostic point of view, and it's like, oh, the Old Testament God's this evil, wrathful God, and Jesus is from the one true God who isn't the creator of the universe, but is higher than the demiurge, and he's come here to save us from the demiurge or something like that.
Right. So, I mean, that idea of samsara, reincarnation, all that stuff, it seems so antithetical to like European Christianity, where it's like, you're going to die of the plague, so you better submit to our authority before it happens or we'll kill you. That doesn't seem very Christian in general. So, but the samsara thing that we're constantly kind of doing work to evolve, like almost, do you think that fits into a Christian, a Jesus narrative, a samsara Jesus narrative?
Well, I think so, especially when you Joseph Smith's doctrine of one eternal round, and you think of how time itself, if it is infinite, you're going to see patterns repeat over and over and over again. And that's what If You Could Hide to Kolob is all about, is how everything's infinite and everything's going to repeat. It says there's no end to matter. Okay, that means that at some point you're going to run into your doppelganger, because you right now, it's sort of that one, I can't remember who came up with this multiverse theory where if matter and space are infinite, we got Earth where we are now, but at some point, if you travel far enough into space, you'll find another rock that formed perfectly right to look just like our Earth, and on that Earth, there's another person that formed perfectly right to look just like you. and they're probably living a significantly better life than you, and they've got 6-pack abs, and they got a big mansion, and they're just this big shot actor in Hollywood, and you're like, man, why couldn't I live that dream? But yeah,
right. And that's not even just multiple dimensions. That's just expansion of mass.
Mm-hmm.
There's every amount of mass, infinite mass, there's infinite symmetry. Everything is happening every possible way all the time, even in just this reality,
Mm-hmm.
in this universe, right? That's crazy.
And it's a doctrine you have to accept if you want to believe that you're eternal and that your soul is eternal and that you can live on post death. So it gets into Nietzsche's eternal return. Also, that was also very inspired by samsara, where everything's going to repeat and so you can either accept the fact that you're going to continue to be, you can progress to being greater and greater and greater, or you can accept the fact that you're just going to be eternally mediocre, and you just got to take on amor fati and just love whatever repeats in that cycle. It's like, oh, that one really horrible thing that happened to you last year, that's going to happen to you again, and you just got to take it and love it, and it doesn't matter how painful it is.
So it sounds like you actually do have a pretty decent understanding of a lot of Eastern philosophy. Did you learn that in Japan, or did you learn that in the West, or how did you get introduced to these ideas?
I mean, I'm mainly, my primary source of knowledge has been YouTube, but yeah,
we're doing all right. We're doing all right.
Yeah. Exactly. YouTube's always been my primary source of education and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm very familiar with a lot of Buddhist concepts and a lot of Shinto and Jainism and Hinduism and a lot of those Eastern religions. And like, so I wouldn't call myself a scholar on any of those. Like, so anything I say about them should be taken with a grain of salt. But I think I could
that's
definitely
funny, because I was going to introduce,
like,
I was going to introduce you as a
I could definitely tell you I could don't call me a scholar. I like to think of myself primarily as a theological philosopher. So like I like to think deeply about all of these crazy concepts, but I wouldn't call myself a historian or like a scholar on any one specific subject. I like to consume what I can and try to think about it as deeply as I can.
So let's like do a maybe like, let's explain then, what do you want to try to explain what you think is like what you kind of believe then? Like how would you differentiate it and distinctualize your belief structure?
So I call myself an existentialist Mormon. That is, I basically follow in the footsteps of Nietzsche, Sartre, Camus, Kierkegaard, these big giants of existentialism and absurdism. I believe that I have no inherent purpose in life. It's like, sure, God has a plan, but that doesn't mean that the plan's either is perfectly suited for me, or that I am forced to accept it.
Or especially that it's reliant upon you. The idea that the plan was somehow reliant upon you is yeah.
No, it's absolutely not reliant on me. Like if I don't fulfill whatever plan God has for me, he's just gonna find somebody else to do it. That's what I learned a long time ago. Like in this one sermon where like it was like Conversion of a Catholic Priest, I think, where he talks about how, oh, this one lady would have gotten converted earlier if this one guy had gone on his mission, but he didn't, so he sent me instead. And so it's kind of like, okay, so literally, if you don't do something, God, you're easily replaceable, and God is just going to replace you and find somebody else to do it. And so we can either play along with it, or we can try to forge our own path forward and be existentialists and be willing to amass as much freedom as possible.
Okay, so expand on that. The idea.
I sort of like, I'm this whole dilemma. This is a whole dilemma that I've been going on back and forth. Like, if you've seen, I'm like Neo from the Matrix. I don't like fate. I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my own what happens to me. I don't like being forced to follow somebody else's plan. I've been trying to follow people's plans my whole life, and it's never worked out. I'm too much of a square. I'm too square, you know. And so
I don't know. What are
Mhm.
the other people's I'm sorry. What kind of plans do you feel like you've been trying to follow? You're too square to follow. Like, what do you mean by that?
Oh, the plans of society in general. The plans of,
okay.
like, when I come out here to be an ALT, they expect me to be a very specific way, to act with very specific manners, to prepare lessons in a very specific, on point way. And I'm too much of a square. I'm too much of a free thinker of trying to, like, discover new ways of doing things. And whenever I try to do something new, whenever I try to do something new, I think could be super cool and creative, I get shot down, and they're like, "No, you have to do it this specific way. Why aren't you doing this specific way? Stop that, whatever you're doing." And I'm just like, I don't know what you guys want from me. I quit, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm too much of a, I might be too much of a free spirit for Japan, and so that's why I moved to Tokyo, because I might have more opportunities out here. But you know, I'll just have to wait and see if anything super solid comes up. But yeah, I'm too much of a free spirit. I'm too much of a child wanting to play with new things, and sometimes I play with something and I'll be like, they'll tell me not to play with that, but I want to anyways. And so I think a lot about, like, Nietzsche's concept that God is dead. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean,
in
work in progress.
And when you're a Mormon, you hear Nietzsche say God is dead, and you're the first thing I think is like, no, duh, there was an apostasy. Of course, somebody would come along and say God is dead, and like, you look around and it's like, both Nietzsche and Joseph Smith were like, yeah, there's definitely something wrong with the Christianity around me. And so Nietzsche famously said, there was only one Christian. He died on the cross. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm just going to say that whenever a Protestant accuses me of not being Christian, I'm just going to be like, sir, there was only one Christian. He died on the cross. So neither of us count as Christians, because nobody is truly following Christ. Like,
it's
specifically down to every jot and tittle. And I don't think that's such a bad thing but you should definitely be willing to admit it.
Yeah, most people, I think, are trying. So this is a big issue we brought up on the show.
There are way too many hypocrites in this world.
People want to use Jesus as an atonement blood sacrifice. Like, you do a blood ritual. It's a magic ceremony. Now you get to be immortal. You know, I mean, it seems like Satanism pretty through and through. So what is the alternative? How do you get something good out of God? What is the living God, and what did Jesus do that's like worth remembering to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think he works as a very suitable, like, as a great example, and I love the atonement. It's like, yeah, people accuse us of a religion that's based on human sacrifice when you think about it, but I think it's about the example that you need to be turning yourself into a human sacrifice if you really want to become possessed by a deity, to be possessed by a god and rise to higher occasions. You need to be willing to die. You need to be willing to sacrifice yourself, your body, your soul, your mind, your heart, if you want to live up to a higher ideal. And so we need higher ideals. We need a God to worship and say, yes, I need to follow him. But I think the way that I see it is, there are two different, you could say, quote unquote, versions of God. There's the literal guy, the big man in the sky with the white beard that we call the Father, you know, God the Father. And then he has his son, Jesus. And then there's the metaphysical or metaphorical God, who's just kind of spaceless, timeless, all, and he just can. This could be like the Holy Ghost, like he just takes possession of you, or she, if you're a girl, I would say it's a she. I would say God is a woman if you're a she. Allow this God. I would more so say allow this metaphysical God to take control of you, more so than the physical God the Father to take possession of you. Because he's the Father, and if he is the Father, he should be expecting us to become gods ourselves, right? He should be expecting us to spread our wings and fly the nest and go and live our own lives, and separate and independent from him. And so that's definitely what I would characterize being an existentialist, is taking on the concept that God is dead. Maybe we need to finish killing God and allow ourselves to become possessed by another spirit that we could call God. Like Nietzsche allowed himself to be possessed by the god Dionysus. He wanted to be this mad god who just went around
eating flesh and drinking blood.
Exactly.
Well, partying is a better. I like what you said. Bacchus parties, right? Sorry.
Well, he fundamentally saw Dionysus as sort of like the god of nature, the god of sort of chaos, and he thought that in this our super structured, orderly world, we need more chaos. As he says, you need chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star. And so he wanted to just be totally consumed by the god Dionysus, and other people want to be consumed by the god Apollo. They want to be these super high cultured people. They want to rise to the sun, sort of an idea. And I think
I like this. This is pretty funny. Open Mind Daily Grind says, Christ King opinion denied, which is the most open-minded comment we've received all day. I just wanted to say to that, though, I think you're missing something when you hear that commenter, because saying God is dead, when you understand that the word God is like Odin or something like that, is saying that the human concept isn't working. And we need to understand that concept better. And it's probably bigger than what we thought it was. So I would agree that the idea that God is like man is flawed. And the idea that man is like God is the original idea that we need to get back towards. Right? Man is in the image of God. God is not in the image of man. But so many people think, well, if God's in the image of man, the man's in the image of God. It must be an equal on both sides of the equation. So God must just look like Steve. And I don't know. It could be. But I get the feeling that it might be a bigger... I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think of this? Do you think God is like a humanoid and all that? Or is it more than this? What does he mean?
If you're talking about God the Father, then he is absolutely humanoid. I mean, Joseph Smith himself described him as a man with a body of flesh and bone, so he's absolutely humanoid. He talks about how if you rip,
he shakes hands.
Today, if you can shake his hand, exactly, you can shake his hand. He's a man. He's got all the body parts that we have. He's got eyes. He's got a mouth. He's got skin. He's got bones. He's got teeth. He's got hair. He's got all that stuff. And Heavenly Mother, you could say also she looks exactly like a woman, but it's sort of like it would be a more perfected, glorified version. They would sort of live up to that ideal masculine, feminine archetype that we think about. But I wouldn't call God like this. I don't know if I would call God perfect. I would say he's whole, but I don't know if I would call God like perfect. Perfect for me would be a robot who has no emotions. So I would call God more so whole. He can be a wrathful God, but he can also be a super kind and loving God. He is a very wholesome embodiment of the shadow and the ego. He encompasses the self almost entirely. But if you want to think about it from the perspective of eternal progression, it means that there's always something more to learn. There's always something more to do. There's always some new thing to create. And so I don't think there's a limit to knowledge. I think as soon as we learn everything, suddenly we can't create everything because we already know it, so why bother creating it? Or another way to look at it is, as soon as you know everything, everything is already in existence. There's no joy of creating something new. You've already experienced everything. Life becomes dull, life becomes boring and monotonous, and there's no conversations to be able to be had. But God consistently throughout, especially in the Book of Mormon, is somebody that can be surprised. Like the brother of Jared, like Jeffrey R. Holland points this out in one of his books, where he's like, what we talk about the paradox of, can God create a boulder so heavy that he can't even lift it? But what about the idea that somebody can have faith so great that God can't even resist allowing that person to just break through the veil? You know, and you look through, as I read through the Old Testament and stuff like that. Yeah, this isn't like a super like complete super perfect all good God. This is a God that has some flaws.
Emotional issues,
a God with emotional issues. This is a God who sometimes loses his mind and causes genocide and floods and all that. And so
that's
a lot of that I think could come from mankind's own imagination. Something tells me that it was Joshua that forced genocide more so than, oh, God commanded him to commit genocide. And
it's an interesting thing, because the idea that Marcion and these Gnostics are reading about these old books, they're saying, you know, God is this jerk. He's this big dictator, you know, and then all of a sudden you've got this like loving God that just
he's a very, very big dictator.
Exactly. Tarnation. But there could be that we're just misinterpreting God. It's not that God has changed, because it's kind of funny. It's like Mark Twain's quote. Like, I used to think my dad was an idiot, and then 3 years later I was amazed how much he'd learned.
Exactly. When you grow up and become like your parents, you realize your parents weren't these all perfect, all loving, all knowing people. That they still have flaws. They're still imperfect, and I think it's totally okay to have flaws. As long
I really want open mind.
As long as you're willing to admit it, you know.
I want open mind, daily grind. I want to find some common ground that we can sit on. So, like, all right, I agree with you. Let's talk about the Jesus laid his hands things down. But I also want to hear, like, when you're talking about the idea of perfect God, these are all words that people have a lot of like passion about. So when you're saying perfect, like, let's like qualify that for a second. Let's use like a Hegelian dialectic. Like, I would say God is omnipotent, omnipresent, immortal, in most ways geometrically perfect. Where are you saying, again, you're saying like he's emotional issues according to the Old Testament, but that could be human. How would how far would you go to say
I think
God
there's a lot of human error in the Bible, and it really gets under my skin when people are like, God breathed into the Bible. That means he wrote every single word, and everything
no
is
compression scheme errors. NIV is fine.
There's no human error at all, because all the prophets just turned into human puppets and just wrote down whatever God whispered into their ears. And no, I think we need to allow the fact that the Bible has, and I would say even the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, all of it is tinged with human error. It's like, that's one of the most awesome things about the Book of Mormon. It's just straight up, yeah, there are going to be errors in this book, but like, you should blame us, not God, because we're the reason why there's so many crazy errors in this book. Like, it literally the first paragraph, Nephi writes, like in the introduction, he's saying this isn't a perfect book, and that's what I love about it. And so it bothers me like no other. Like, I want to die and throw up and scratch off my skin whenever I hear somebody say God wrote the Bible and he breathed it, so that means it's completely perfect and pure
without error. Okay, I definitely, whether or not we agree about perfection of God, I think we can agree at least together on the Bible is like, you have to really read the Bible, and you have to wonder about what version you have, and you probably should know the history of the Bible and anything that's happened since the Nicene Creed. Like, this is an issue too, because we talk about martyrs, right? Martyrs were witnesses of Christ. They were all murdered, a lot of them by Paul. So we have this new Christianity that's emerged. Earlier, Open Mind Daily Grind, I'm giving you like some shout outs for whatever reason, because you're just so flamboyant and interesting. Jesus brought his will to his 12 disciples and gave them power and laid hands on them. What about that? What do you think about this? The disciples, the priesthood powers.
Oh,
the priesthood
is absolutely a thing. I wouldn't deny the fact that Jesus gave priesthood to his 12 disciples, that then those same 12 disciples gave the priesthood to Joseph Smith and all that. I think that's totally legit, but I think there's a difference between, if you want to talk about the power of God and whether or not that very power is perfect, or what I would characterize as wholesome, which I think I would rather be whole than perfect in general. I want to integrate my shadow. I don't want to cut it off of me and call it the devil. I want to make friends with my shadow. I want to be friends with my own devil. I want to figure out this thing. I want to say this thing is part of me, whether I like it or not. The real question is,
that point's huge.
My dark side exists,
or separate it from myself.
Figure out how to use it as a tool, rather than being like Jesus and saying the devil is something that's totally separate from me and I choose to cut him off. I think
that's exactly the opposite of what God's doing, right? Yeah. When God's not saying the devil is his equal opposite.
Exactly. So, that's why a lot of Protestants hate it when we say that Jesus and Satan are brothers. And it's like, well, yes, they are brothers, and that's a good thing, that you should see yourself as brothers with your own devil. You should see yourself as brothers with your own individuals, with your own personal Satan, instead of cutting it off and calling it something completely separate from yourself.
I had with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, I went to see a mass recently, and they've changed a lot of the words. And one of the things they used to say is deliver us from evil. And now they say deliver us from the evil one. And I hate it. I hate it, because the idea that the evil one is so separate from our own evil nature is missing the point. And the idea, I think it's really interesting what you just said about integration of the whole over just being the perfect thing. Because I could cut off all of my imperfections and just be, but then I wouldn't be omnipresent. I wouldn't be everything. So if God really is everythingness, then God has to have a small part of him that is Lucifer, not a 50-50, but some amount of imperfection and evil that is integrated into the whole. The whole is not necessarily only made up of perfect things. It wouldn't be whole. That's an interesting point.
Right. So in general, I would rather worship a whole God than a perfect God.
So in terms of a whole God,
in
terms of a whole God, though, I don't know, leaving is, I'm the worst at that idea. But just the idea of a whole God, then what do you qualify that as? So a whole God can then have emotions, can have human natures.
Yeah, absolutely. He can have perfections. He can be super wrathful at times. He can kill all the babies in Egypt at one point, but at the same time be delivering the Jews out of Egypt. I think he can be a super loving, super caring guy, but also super hateful and vengeful. And I think there's something I talk about this a lot in my Joshua Graham video specifically, where I think it's something super deep and profound. Oh, Andreas, did you go away? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, in my Joshua Graham video, if you know that, he's a video game character in the video game Fallout New Vegas, who is he did some really terrible stuff. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and he was this guy who was a military general, and he was a Mormon, a member of the church, and he was a missionary and preaching, but then he got mixed up with the wrong people and started killing lots of people. But then he had this but then he made a mistake and got set on, and the guy he was following set him on fire and threw him into the Grand Canyon. He's trying, and then when you meet him in the game, he's this guy who's trying to take vengeance against the guy who did that to him, but at the same time he can be a super merciful guy. And so the idea is, when a person, I think it's something super profound when a person is both super righteous, has the capacity for super righteousness and super wickedness. There's something supernatural about it. And so I think if you integrate your shadow, there's something super divine about it. There's something supernatural. Like, you're not even a human being anymore. You're something else entirely. If you're super wicked and super righteous at the same time. And it's like, if you think of Hitler, he was completely one-sided. He was completely wicked. But if he had balanced himself out with something super righteous, maybe, I don't know.
To be fair, he was a vegetarian and he loved dogs, so I don't know how that's gonna.
I hate all vegetarians in general, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope to fascism. Yeah. I agree, and art school too. But
right, well,
you got to be careful about those.
Humans have eyes in front, which means we're predators. We go after prey, so we are specifically carnivores.
Legendary. Does God have a girlfriend? God has a wife, Sophia. It's in the Bible many times
absolutely
over.
God has a girlfriend, but why can't your wife be your girlfriend? It's just
interesting point.
I don't know if the one, she has lots of different names. You can call her Sophia, you can call her Ashera. She has it seems like she has lots of different names. The one thing you don't want to do is be like King Josiah and try to get rid of all the Asherah in your temple. That's another interesting part of being whole, isn't it? Is you're not just talking about the shadow, you're not just talking about the devil, you're also talking about your anima. You're also talking about the feminine side to yourself, or if you're a girl, you're talking about the animus, the masculine side to yourself. And you want to recognize those specific qualities within yourself and integrate them just as much as the shadow.
So this whole idea, though, of like the biblical war in heaven is that there's a perfect, all-powerful, universal singularity, which is the source and is God. And then there's archons, angels, all these things. One of the most high, beautiful angel rebels, right? So Lucifer's not equal with God. But at the same time, this fallen angel, aren't they choosing to be separate and apart from God? Do you think that God has like the choice even in that relationship if Lucifer's decided to be separate and apart?
Well, that depends on whether or not you want to take the Protestant approach and say that God created the devil. And it's like, if that's the case, then God is evil because he created evil. He created an evil being. He created everything about, they say that God created everything about Satan, like his consciousness, his mind, his and so everything that God would have set up would eventually turn out to be the devil that we know today, and he would have known it because he's also all-knowing. So
all-knowing, yeah.
Therefore, he knew he created something evil, which makes himself evil, and so it bothers me when Protestants aren't willing to accept that. But
do you have a different way? Yeah.
In LDS theology, we don't see it that way. Joseph Smith describes create in a different sense. He says create means to organize and build like a ship, like you're using pre-existing materials, and that's what. And then you go deeper into the Book of Abraham, and it talks about you go deeper into the Book of Abraham where it talks about intelligences and how God saw the intelligences, and these were already existing intelligences that God had nothing to do with. And how exactly intelligences, where exactly they come from, how they form, I have no idea. All I know is they're eternal, and so they probably had no formation to begin with. It's sort of just like they're there, he sees them, I am more intelligent than these, allow me to help them to become more intelligent. And so he gathered other materials and created spirit bodies for those intelligences. And then those intelligences said, let us expand further. And so he helped them to get physical bodies, and they all created the earth, which makes us the demiurge, because we're the ignorant gods that created the earth. Or at least you could say so, to the extent that we assisted Christ in creating the earth.
Right. Especially outside of the Garden of Eden, because you see, like, as soon as we're outside of the Garden of Eden, things are not very perfect, and there's continual.
Right. So God did not create Satan in the Protestant way of thinking. He created Satan in the way that, look, here's the thing that we all need to accept, is that evil is a self-existing thing that has always existed and will continue to exist forever and ever. It's not something you can just extinguish like a flame. It's not something that is just going to go away. It's as necessary to existence as light is. Could you imagine how boring life would be if it was all white? There was no shadows at all anywhere. That you wouldn't be able to see anything, for one, but also because everything would be white. Everything would be super bright. So you need that good, but at the same time, you wouldn't be able to see anything if it's all darkness. The only way to see is if you have that proper combination of light and dark. So everything's not just all white, or everything's not just all black. Everything, you have light, but you also have shadow. And so evil is a very self-existing thing that we need to. What did he say?
Oh, sorry, I just got a Brave New Order Films new member. Just to say thank you, Brave New Order Films. We appreciate you. It's awesome.
All right, just don't be a Brave New World Order.
You could be Stunning New World Order. That would be pretty brave.
Well, we already know that the Jehovah's Witnesses are already working on that with their Brave New World Bibles. But anyways, so yeah, Satan is something completely separate from God. He's his own being. He makes his own choices. God isn't forcing anything on him, but God allows evil. So what does that say about God?
That God the fact that God allows evil, that God isn't like
the fact that God didn't create evil, but he still allows evil.
Well, it could say there's different ways to interpret that. It could be that God thinks this is the best way for things to be. It could be that God is allowing for us to learn a lesson. How would you do it?
Well, I think it's exactly because God recognizes the necessity of evil. He recognizes that evil is a good and important thing that needs to take place in the universe, that there needs to be that good balanced harmony of chaos and order. You need to be able to choose one over the other. You need to be able to choose, as the Book of Mormon so aptly puts it, choose liberty and eternal life, or captivity and damnation, or I think I messed up the quotation there, but something like that. You need to be able to choose to be free, or the only way to be free is to be able to choose freedom or to choose captivity. Those are the two extremes, and they have to always exist in order to continue to have freedom. That's the interesting paradox about freedom, isn't it? Is like when you play, do you play like any like super difficult video games?
Me? Yeah, sometimes. I admit it. Yeah, I do.
Sometimes like a Dark Souls or something like that.
Oh man, what was the one I just thought was so good? Hold on a second. You keep talking. I'm gonna find you something to show you in a second.
All right. So like if you're somebody that plays like a Dark Souls kind of game, there's lots of like studies that talk about how people just feel this huge, immense sense of freedom and power from playing games like that. These super difficult games. And so there's this funny paradox about freedom and power, that the more oppressed you feel, the more impossible something seems, but then you somehow figure a way to overcome that impossibility, the more powerful you feel and the more free you feel.
Okay, check out Armored Core. This game is nuts. This is basically the war in heaven between angels and fallen angels, but with machines, which I think tracks if you've looked at the Seraphim. It's really nuts.
Michael absolutely was using a machine gun against Satan, you know. Some big mecha thing.
Tommy guns got to be named after St. Thomas, I think.
Right. Well, there were Gundams in the premortal life, you know.
Yeah.
And they were using.
You know what? Can we entertain that? I really want to go into that, but now that we've offended a few people, I feel like we should do one more part, which I want to tie in, which is the evil of Jesus.
I'm totally chill with offending people. You know.
Yeah, me too. I just want to cover. I want to make sure what I'm clear about.
I guess that's
one
the
time
funny
I
thing
said that
about me.
the other day I was
like,
talking to I was talking to somebody about Hank Williams and Hank Williams Jr. and Hank Williams III and Hank Williams Jr. There was a fake news thing that said he voted for Hillary Clinton, and I had never checked out that it was false, and I believed it. And I'm gonna go around telling somebody who loves Hank Williams Jr. an untrue thing and offending him. So I got to be careful what I say. So I want to make sure, like, if I'm that worried about Hank Williams Jr., I should be worried about Jesus. So I'm just curious, like, if you think God is whole, not necessarily just perfect, he's beyond perfect, he's whole. What about Jesus, right? Because a big part of the Protestants and the Pauline Catholic blood sacrifice satanic immortality ritual is that they murdered Jesus because he was perfect, right? Or is it that he was without sin? Or what do you think about Jesus compared to like whole and perfect and all that?
Well, first, I just want to quote, I think it was Immanuel Kant that said, if the truth will kill them, let them die. That's sort of how I view the truth. If the truth offends you, then be offended. I don't care. It's not my fault that you're offended by the truth. So
there's a certain amount of hypnotic reaction. Yeah.
I'm going to speak my mind, and if you're offended, I'm sorry, but that's your problem, not mine.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean to make it a big deal. I was more interesting to me though. Is Jesus perfect, or is Jesus whole? Is Jesus God? All that.
Well, I think starting out, his aim was to be perfect. He was all about be therefore perfect as your Father is in heaven. But I think the more he lived his life, the more he started to understand the glorious wholeness of what it means to be divine. Of instead of resisting the temptation of evil, allow yourself to be totally consumed by it and even tortured by it. And that was the whole ordeal about the Garden of Eden, and the fact that he needed to accept that bitter cup and drink from it. He needed to be willing to undergo terrible suffering that he might understand like the glories of eternity. He needed to die and go straight to hell and experience what it's like to be the devil, to experience what it's like to be Satan, to experience what it means to be human, if you will. Because I think it was Plato or Socrates, one of those super ancient Greek philosophers. Yeah, it was in Plato. And in Plato's Republic, he talks about if this super all-righteous guy comes to us like Jesus, we're going to want to test his righteousness. We're going to be like, oh, really? You're this all good. You're this goody two shoes guy. Prove it. And the only way to prove something like that is to put tremendous stress on that person, and is to say, will you crack under these circumstances? Will you accept wholeness, or be continually striving for perfection? Will you accept danger and pain instead of trying to live a perfectly comfortable life? And that's
or you're gonna whip a bunch of people in the temple when you get upset.
Exactly. You know what? And that was a big thing, I think, is like Jesus was doing all these crazy things. And like if you get into like some of the, like, I don't know how true it is, but if you look at like the infancy gospel, he's doing all of these crazy things even as a child. He's killing people just for bumping into him, and like he kills a whole crowd of people and then raises them back to life. I don't know how legit that gospel is, but and then like you go into like right. Well, it was sort of a later.
Well, okay, but like 300 or 400 AD, right? It's still it's around the Nicene Creed,
right? Exactly.
At least as old as the Catholic Nicene Creed,
But yeah, you if you want to look at Jesus, whipping people in the temple and flipping over their tables and trying to cast them out, you could almost say that was when he was shadow possessed. That was when he was so into being perfect and whole and totally righteous that any form of sin, he just couldn't accept it. It's like, wait, you're exchanging money in the temple. You're like selling things that aren't related to the temple. You're like, you got all this merchandise and stuff. You got this gift shop set up. You're trying to sell action figures. No, I can't have any of that. So he's got to flip up all the tables. He's got to whip some people. He's got to break out the herd. He really just got shadow possessed by that because he was so concerned with perfection and wanting everything to just live up to this super high unrealistic standard. And yeah, sure, should the Pharisees have been selling stuff in the temple? I don't know. We don't really get a lot of details as to what they were selling.
I know what it is, by the way. So the deal really? is, so the deal is the temple, because of the Exodus, they set it up that only the main temple could take shekels, and no one else was printing shekels. So if you were going to do a pardoning of sins and you're going to do atonement or something, you got to go to this one temple. And when you get to that temple, you got to use their token, like a laundry token, basically. And you got to buy those tokens. So it's a racket they're running, because then they just get those tokens back and then they sell them back out again and they do the whole thing because you got to do it their way. And Jesus is like, dude, this is not the point of atonement, which is a big kind of the irony of the whole he's going to get killed and do an atonement ritual thing. He's like, let me show you how it's done. No, but the idea that Jesus was like, this is not what you're supposed to do in the temple, because people thought they had, especially like old ladies were like, this is what I have to do because I walked on grass, because I had to walk on grass because it was the only way to get to my home on Shabbat. You know, all these stupid rules that they were creating, which is another reason why they're like
you can only take so many steps on the Sabbath.
Shame on you, by the way, because all you got to do is put a copper wire over your head. Have you seen in Hell's Kitchen in Brooklyn, right? There's a metal wire they use. And as long as there's a metal wire over your head, you can break Shabbat rules because you're inside of the construction site of a temple. There's so many loopholes. You can have 1/64th pork in your soup, right? You're allowed to have pork in your soup as long as it's only 1/64th. There's a lot of loopholes to it. So Jesus is going around doing all these things and people are like, how dare Jesus do that? And then people are like, yeah, but he's justified. Right? That's the word, justified. He's justified in what he's doing. So it's okay.
Right. Absolutely. Right. So he gets shadow possessed. He starts flipping up all the tables because all the laundry money laundry stuff like that. So he flips up all the tables. And then he goes about his ministry. He's trying to he does a lot of funny things in his ministry when you think about it. He can't help but sometimes he can't help but, you know, whenever he doesn't start debates, but he sure as hell can't help but, you know, go into the debate with the Jews. Like he'll finish them like a boss. Like, before Abraham was, I am. Mic drop, walk off. And then they try to stone him and stuff like that. And so he obviously enjoyed debating with the Pharisees, even if he never like actively started them. He's always trying to be one step ahead of them, and like, oh, you're coming to me with this one argument, well, like, here, I'm gonna one up you, so like you can't argue with me anymore, kind of an idea. Like, oh, we got who should we be paying tribute to, Caesar or God and stuff like that. He's like, oh, you know, just and pay whoever's inscription is on it, pay it to him.
Render
unto Caesar. Yeah, what's owed to Caesar.
Whatever's
like,
owed
I'm
to
not,
him. Only.
I'm not gonna fall into your trap, you stupid Pharisees. And so like.
You get the feeling like Cohen lawyers all started because they couldn't sacrifice in the temple anymore, and they saw Jesus, and they're like, that guy knew something. Right. We really got to get.
I don't think Jesus was like this super stern, stoic guy who's just straight-faced all the time. I think he was a very human person who did human things. And eventually, he really just had to take that bitter cup and accept wholeness more so than perfection. Oh no, what are you doing? Looking up Jesus Superstar?
I just always remember about 20 odd years ago when the Mormon missionaries first were like coming to my house, and they came over and I was like burning DVDs because it was like, that was how I bought Chinese food at school from my teachers who would buy movies. And I'm watching him burn a copy of Jesus Christ Superstar. And then the missionaries are like, oh man, like they've got machine guns and purple tank tops. This isn't historically accurate. And I'm like, oh bro, you don't want to be the missionary coming in here and talk about anachronisms in Andrew Lloyd Webber. That's, I mean, I get it, but it's not gonna go well for anybody. But I don't know. What do you think about, like, so the Jesus Christ Superstar movie kind of shows him as not, I mean, he's a dude in this movie, right? It's kind of, he's a guy who is,
well, I think
both sides of reality.
Right. I think that's something that I like about The Chosen, is they really try to humanize Jesus and make him look like this funny guy at times who's just making jokes with his friends. And I think Jesus was definitely a lot like that. And then, like, he does a lot of other interesting things during his ministry. Like, I can't remember the entire reason why he cursed a fig tree, but that was an interesting episode. And he went around, doing a lot of good. He preached some really awesome stuff, but I think the whole time, like, it was perfectly set up with the confrontation in the desert with the devil, that he was really denying himself that that critical aspect of himself, of wholeness. And so eventually it just came down to whether or not he was going to drink that bitter cup.
Yeah. So in terms of the idea of Jesus' sacrifice, are you a big fan of this idea? Do you think, like, Jesus's blood sacrifice makes you immortal? Is that a big part of the salvation plan to you? Or is that
I don't know. It's a very
cannibals in the Catholic Church?
I've made so many videos on the atonement. It's getting hot in here. I need to open up a window.
Whoever knew that Japan had, like, decent weather, I'm happy for you. I was afraid it was gonna be snowing right now for some reason, but it's May. I guess isn't it? Flood season?
It's rainy season is June and July, where it rains almost nonstop. But it's cloudy right now. But yeah, so yeah, what was I about to? Where was I?
I think we're talking about atonement and scapegoat.
Oh, right, atonement. So, like, I've made so many videos about the atonement. But I think ultimately what it boils down to, I don't know if there's any, like, blood magic about it. I'd say it's more so, I think it's more so symbolic, more so like, it's more so about being that representative of what it means to totally be consumed by everything in the universe, rather than just trying to be one-sided, rather than just being all white instead of all black. It's about the yin yang. It's about being willing to accept both dark and lightness within yourself, lest you become possessed by the other. Because if you suppress your darkness, it's going to come back and bite you like a dog, like with vengeance.
Yeah, or better, you try to, like, people don't realize that they're making multiple personality disorder, because, like, well, I'm really not like that. Like, that's not me. That's like this other. That's me in a bad place. But that thing becomes Tyler. That's Tyler Durden from Fight Club, and you're basically creating a chance as soon as you're unconscious, it's going to take over your body and go outside.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Tyler Durden, because I think that's a really great example. Is that Tyler Durden, the whole plot twist in Fight Club is that Tyler Durden's not real. He's the man that the narrator wishes he was. He's like this super buff guy who doesn't give a crap about super buff, good looking guy who looks like Brad Pitt, who just doesn't give a crap about what anybody thinks. And so he's everything that the narrator wishes he was, but he's been suppressing him for so long, trying to fit into this perfectly good, normal, goody two shoes lifestyle of his corporate job and life in general. But then he gets shadow possessed and blows up his apartment, and eventually he has to accept the fact that Tyler is not a separate individual from himself. He is Tyler Durden, and that's the whole point of the movie: is that is to accept the fact that the shadow is you. He is a part of you. He's not this separate person. And you need to be willing to choose to integrate him into yourself. And however you do that. But one of the greatest scenes in that movie, or at least something I think about a lot, is the scene where they're alone in that warehouse, and Tyler pours acid on the narrator's hand, and he's like, he's trying to resist it, but Tyler doesn't want him to. He wants him to accept the fact that his hand is burning and just allow it to burn. And I'm not saying that we should be pouring acid on ourselves, but I think he talks about how you need to be willing to accept horrible things in life. You need to be willing to accept that pain is inevitable, but also you need to be willing to accept that pain is necessary for true self-improvement. Another famous line he says is like when they're in the subway and they're looking at these perfect images of male bodies on ads. He's like, is that what a perfect male looks like? And Tyler says, self-improvement is masturbation. Now, what do you think he meant by that?
That it makes it makes you feel better, but it doesn't actually do anything to the universe.
Something like that. So he says self-improvement is masturbation, but self-destruction. In other words, what most people call self-improvement is just people patting you on the head and being like, oh, good job. Yes, good for you. When you haven't even done anything. Most of self-improvement is you making yourself feel good, but it has no real meaning. It doesn't have any real value in the long grand scheme of things. And the only way to truly feel alive about yourself is to be willing to be dangerous. It's about willing to to quote Nietzsche, it's about being willing to build your house on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. And if you know Mount Vesuvius, that's the volcano that destroyed Pompeii. It's about that. It goes back to Amor Fati, accepting the fact that pain is inevitable and loving it instead of trying to resist it and run away from it. Because if you want to destroy yourself, if you want to live eternally, I guess destruction and mediocrity are two different things. If you want to live an eternally mediocre life, be comfy your whole life. Don't try anything new. Don't try to stand out. Don't do anything dangerous. Don't do anything thrilling. Just stay where you are. Stay in your house. Hug your giant stuffed teddy bear as much as you can. But if you really want to actually improve instead of just masturbate, you got to get out of your house. You need to be willing to take risks. You need to, be willing to, you need to say, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. You need to take on, I don't know, a whole new perspective in life and love pain, love the glory that comes from overcoming hard things.
So I know
that's what the atonement is it's about accepting all of the world's pain at once. It's about allowing yourself to bleed from every pore and then be crucified and nailed to the cross and then die and then still rising above it, accepting it and becoming whole rather than just perfect.
So, I mean, to me, that's interesting because there's, to me, that sounds a bit in terms of integration, that's kind of like saying instead of pure sin-free Jesus, you're kind of talking about integration of God and the devil. It's Jesus and Satan.
That's what I think. That's what I think Jesus went to hell for, was to integrate his devil.
Wow.
I don't, people talk about how, he went to hell to get the keys so he can open up the gates and let us all out.
But they make it a pretty big deal that he had to go.
No, I think he went to hell to have a sit down with the devil, with his devil, and to really try to understand him instead of trying to shun him away his whole life. Because if you notice, post rising from the dead, he doesn't talk about the devil a whole lot. It's almost like the devil doesn't exist. He is completely one with the devil.
It's like North Korea after Trump, right? It's it's not an issue.
North Korea was never an issue to begin with, but
emotionally in the memes,
they're like,
that might be kind of true about
one of my favorite. If you've seen, there was this one funny YouTube video where it's like a round table gathering of nations leaders, and America turns to North Korea and is like, North Korea, what's going on? And it shows a clip from Up of that one little Asian kid like going ah, and then
oh my gosh,
then it cuts back to the guy as Americans like, oh no, you scared me. So that I think that's a perfect example of North Korea's. They're just this tiny little nation that thinks they're bigger than they really are, and they've got some major small man syndrome going on over there. And Kim Jong-un likes to think he's this big hotshot who's making nukes, trying to scare people, but he's not scaring anybody.
I like him. He's adorable. I hope his sister does well.
Oh, you think Kim Jong-un is adorable?
I think a lot. I use adorable a lot about a lot of things, and that would probably be one of them. Yeah, I think
it's like life in North Korea probably really sucks, and like you hope people actually escape from it, but it's never been. Nobody's ever taken them seriously.
Yeah. Well, we only got about 10 more minutes because I'm gonna do some family. So
but it's like if you want to talk about things that were taken seriously, you talk about the Red Scare, you talk about communism. Now the U.S. was all up on everybody's bizwax about communism. Like they were worried Japan was going to go communism if they didn't enforce democracy on them.
Which is their form of they just want everyone else doing it their job. That's our job. Yeah.
Okay, exactly. So literally Japan is the only country in the world that doesn't have their own written constitution.
Well, I guess Britain has an unwritten constitutional monarchy, right?
So right, but they wrote their own constitution. Japan didn't write their own constitution.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Well, I want to do another video with you in a couple of weeks, but I have to cut this one short. I usually try to do 2 hours, but I want to do one more question kind of on this subject because this idea of Jesus and then
let anybody else in the comments throw in a question or something.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, like especially if you were upset, we want to hear from you. That's pretty funny. But
I gotta know if I offended anybody.
I'm a fan of that. That's a good. It makes me sleep better at night. But if Jesus and Lucifer met before this, right? Because you got Jesus in the desert with Lucifer is tempting him for 40 days before the beginning of his ministry, really, or after the lost years. Why does he have to go to hell to interact and listen to? Because I really like this idea. I like this idea that Lucifer hasn't been heard out, and that's the solution, really. But what do you think?
I think that is absolutely the solution, that Jesus went to hell to have a sit-down conversation with the devil and to understand him.
And why couldn't he do that in the desert?
Why couldn't he do that in the desert? He could have.
The devil came to him for 40 days.
He could have, but instead he resisted the devil the whole time.
Oh, he wasn't ready. He was
trying to. Well, he wasn't ready. No, he wasn't ready. But also because he was still too consumed with trying to be one-sided to actually have a sit-down with his devil and try to understand him. And so going to hell, you could say to a certain extent, understanding the devil helped him to understand the evils of humanity as a whole, to understand the pains and trials.
I mean, Jesus is God walking in man's shoes.
Of what it means to be evil by understanding what we could call the arbiter of probably the most evil being in the universe or something like that. Jesus needed to descend. It's a very common myth. If you look back at like the myth of Ishtar going to hell to visit her sister who was like getting married or something like that, she had to go through several gates, strip off clothes at each gate until she was just completely naked, completely open to her sister, and then she had to die and resurrect, just like Jesus. Or you could look at, from Greek, you could talk about the devil kidnapping the goddess of spring and taking her to hell, and then she would rise again. They're all spring myths. Jesus dying and resurrecting is the same as Ishtar dying and resurrecting. He dies in Christmas, or he dies in winter, and then that's why everything's dead, and then rises again in spring. Things resurrect in spring, kind of an idea. So they're all spring myths. They're all about a god or a deity that we could call it, or a son of God dying and then having a reconciliation with an evil aspect and then resurrecting. You have to descend as he says in the Doctrine and Covenants, he had to descend below all things before he could ascend above all things, because as above, so below. And that's what it means to be a god, is to be willing to take on infinite pain and suffering and then rise above it all.
Yeah, so that's the other question. Like, so if we're like Jesus and we're supposed to be like Jesus, where does that lead us into how we're supposed to behave and what we're supposed to do with our lives? I mean, you kind of made a point that we didn't have to do it; someone else could do it. So, like, what should
we too often think that, oh, Jesus already did everything. We don't need to do anything more. We just need to say, Lord Jesus, I believe, and we're good. But no, I think Jesus, the atonement is more so meant to be an example than blood magic. It's more so meant to be, hey guys, I did this. It's nuts. And you need to do it too if you want to be like me.
That's legit. Well, also a good question to ask you is, where can they find more of your content? I know you have a YouTube channel. Let me pull it up. Where should I lead them off to?
Just my YouTube channel, This Saint's Theory, where I make lots of crazy videos, and like I talk about Nietzsche and I talk about Carl Jung. So like if you see at the top of my banner, I sort of like, I have like, you have your regular prophets on one side, but I also have like secular prophets on the other side. And so that's been my whole thing, is trying to integrate secularism with the church teachings. And I really also love this banner. Like,
this is a great banner.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fun. And then I also use like pop culture stuff, like anime and movies and stuff like that, to talk about key essential doctrinal topics in a very digestible manner.
That's legit. Well, I think so there will be some people that were shocked, offended, and won't be able to sleep at night. But there are gonna be a lot of people, I think, that really like your take, because it's not everyone else's take, and it's interesting to hear a different perspective, especially one that's tied to philosophy.
And that's a fun video, because I wrote up. I don't speak Japanese too well, so I had to use ChatGPT to turn it into readable English but Japanese, or like I use the Roman numerals, Roman letters system for Japanese, and I just read it to. I had my brother-in-law who served a mission in Japan check it for me, and then I read it in soccer meeting. So that whole video is in Japanese, but I put the English translation in the section below.
That's so good. I love this already. I wish to relate my experiences as a foreigner in this land. This is such a good video.
Yeah, so, yeah, and then if you want to,
oh, you did. I was gonna say, you got to do a talk on Vinland Saga with Seth Garrett, and guess what?
Yeah, I did. And I already made 2 videos about Vinland Saga, and those are my highest rated videos. So that's all.
That's hilarious. I haven't even seen them yet. Yeah. I can't wait. I'll watch them later. That's exciting.
And then if you wanna follow up with what I've been doing in Japan, you can go follow me on Journey to the East.
Is it on YouTube or .com?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah.
Journey to the West.
I don't know if it'll immediately.
East. This up here?
So, no, that's not it. It'll have me, but as a Naruto character. Yeah, that's me.
That's got to be.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Mormon. Joseph Smith Naruto is I'm a big fan of that. Okay, so yeah, everyone check these out too.
That's not Joseph Smith Naruto. That's me as a Naruto character.
It's all the same, bro. It's all the same. Well, all right. Thank you for doing this. Let's do another episode pretty soon. I'd love to get you on with Seth Garrett again. I think he's doing a free will thing. I don't know if you were invited to that, but I'll sneak you a link if he hasn't already. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Hey, thanks. See ya.